The border between Thailand and Cambodia has never been a line of peace. For decades, this thin strip of contested territory, dense with jungle, scarred with memory, and marked by stone relics of ancient empires, has resisted diplomatic resolution. It is here, once again, in the shadows of Preah Vihear, and along the undrawn margins of nationalism, that military calculations have overtaken diplomacy, and that conflict has resumed. In the final week of July, in the year 2025, artillery thundered across the jungle canopy. Thai self-propelled howitzers unleashed a calibrated barrage along three key axes. In response, Cambodian batteries fired back from dug-in positions near Svay Lu and Chom Kazant. This was not a brief border skirmish. This was a concerted exchange of fire between two standing armies, both claiming defense, both signaling resolve. On the surface, this was a localized incident, a quarrel over topography and historical ownership. But that interpretation would be strategically naive, because beneath the shellfire is something deeper, a convergence of insecurity, ambition, and regional silence, weaponized through terrain and memory. What triggered this latest round of hostilities was deceptively procedural. In mid-July, Thai military engineers moved to reinforce a forward logistics outpost near the Ta Mon Tam Temple. The site lies within what both nations ambiguously claim as buffer territory, a zone left unresolved in post-colonial treaties. When Thai troops crossed a ridgeline to establish concrete platforms for mobile radar, Cambodia viewed the move as a de facto incursion. Phnom Penh issued a formal diplomatic protest. Bangkok ignored it. 3 days later, Cambodian commandos attempted to dismantle the Thai construction site overnight. The operation was partially successful, but it cost them. Thai drone footage confirmed the presence of elite troops on the hill, and Bangkok responded with pre-authorized kinetic action. The escalation from there was swift, and now the two nations are locked in a military standoff, with civilian populations bearing the consequences. Over 12,000 Cambodians have fled villages near the contested zone, moving south toward temporary shelters in Kampong Thom and Siem Reap. Thailand, for its part, has evacuated over 4,000 civilians from border towns near Sisaket and Surin. This is not just a military confrontation. It is a humanitarian rupture playing out in real time as both governments mobilize for an engagement that neither side is fully willing to de-escalate. The timing is no accident. Thailand's government, under the leadership of Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra, is facing mounting political pressure from both nationalist elements and military hardliners who view compromise on territorial integrity as weakness. Cambodia's leader, Hun Manet, the son of longtime strongman Hun Sen, is equally constrained. His young administration is attempting to assert sovereignty without appearing beholden to either Hanoi or Beijing, both of whom have vested interests in Cambodian stability. But what makes this conflict particularly dangerous is not the firepower involved. It is the silence that surrounds it. ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, has issued no joint resolution. No emergency summit has been called. No public appeal for restraint has been delivered with force. Behind closed doors, there are conversations, but the regional bloc, which once aspired to become a third pole in global diplomacy, is now fractured by internal disputes and external dependency. The Thai-Cambodian conflict is not merely a bilateral affair. It is a litmus test for Southeast Asia's institutional cohesion and for how great powers intend to exploit that fragmentation. As Thai F-16 second conduct precision bombing runs near the Dangrek mountain range, and Cambodian artillery positions threaten Thai logistics routes, a new phase of regional instability is emerging. The escalation may appear tactical, but the implications are strategic. Because war, once begun even in increments, becomes a currency of leverage. And in this case, multiple actors are watching closely to see how that currency is spent. To understand why the Thai-Cambodian conflict matters beyond its immediate geography, one must examine the historical scaffolding that underpins the present confrontation. At the heart of the dispute lies not simply nationalism, but memory. The memory of colonial maps, French surveys, and arbitrated borders drawn in the absence of local agency. The Preah Vihear Temple, a centerpiece of this conflict, was awarded to Cambodia by the International Court of Justice in the year 1962. Thailand never fully accepted the ruling, and the border demarcation surrounding the temple remains, to this day, disputed. The terrain complicates matter. Dense forest, narrow escarpments, and centuries-old footpaths have made surveillance and patrolling uneven, leaving both nations to interpret the boundary in ways that serve their respective narratives. Cambodia has claimed continuous violations by Thai troops over the past 2 decades. Thailand, in turn, accuses Cambodia of militarizing civilian structures near the border to create facts on the ground. But the return to open conflict in the year 2025 suggests that something has changed. That change is not legal. It is strategic. Since the year 2022, Thailand has undergone a subtle shift in its military doctrine. Under increasing pressure from China's growing naval footprint in the Gulf of Thailand and the Andaman Sea, Thai defense planners have emphasized a more assertive forward posture. This includes the modernization of air bases near Ubon, Ratchathani, expanded radar coverage, and an integrated response framework involving both ground forces and air assets. These upgrades, though aimed at long-term deterrence, have immediate applications. The border with Cambodia offers Thailand an arena in which to test readiness, signal resolve, and demonstrate to both domestic and foreign audiences that its armed forces remain regionally dominant. Cambodia, meanwhile, has found itself squeezed between leverage and dependence. In the aftermath of global supply chain realignments and diplomatic reshuffling following the global pandemic, Cambodia has deepened its economic ties with China while still relying on Vietnam for key logistics and intelligence support. This dual alignment creates structural tension. China provides capital and infrastructure. Vietnam provides institutional continuity. But neither Beijing nor Hanoi are willing to intervene openly in a Thai-Cambodian military conflict unless their core interests are directly threatened. And herein lies the vulnerability. Because Phnom Penh knows, if it appears too dependent on China, it risks alienating Vietnam, whose influence in the Cambodian military remains deep. But if it leans too close to Vietnam, it jeopardizes Chinese investment in critical infrastructure projects, including the Ream Naval Base expansion and the Phnom Penh-Sihanoukville corridor. Thailand understands this balancing act, and its current actions are, in part, designed to expose it. By drawing Cambodia into a limited but prolonged military engagement, Thailand is testing the degree to which Cambodia can respond independently without tipping too far toward either of its powerful neighbors. It is also sending a message to other ASEAN nations. That message is not encoded in rhetoric, but in action. And the message is simple. In a region where diplomacy is paralyzed, deterrence will come from unilateral strength. No joint communiqué will prevent airstrikes. No ASEAN charter will stop artillery shells. And no great power will intervene quickly enough to change the equation before it unfolds. This is the logic behind escalation, a logic that Thailand is currently pursuing with calculation, and that Cambodia is struggling to match with coherence. What emerges is not just conflict, it is a strategic rehearsal for something larger. As the Thai-Cambodian clash enters its second operational week, the strategic posture of both militaries has begun to harden. On the Thai side, the Royal Thai Armed Forces have transitioned from reactive deployment to zone denial. Mobile artillery units, primarily M109 self-propelled howitzers, have taken up entrenched positions along the western escarpments of the Dangrik Range. These units are backed by precision-guided surveillance from Hermes 900 drones, supplied through an Israeli-Thai defense procurement agreement signed in early 2024. Thailand's Air Force, already well-practiced in joint exercises with American and South Korean partners, has executed controlled air superiority missions over its own territory without yet crossing into Cambodian airspace. This restraint is not accidental. It is part of a deliberate doctrine. Maintain escalation dominance without triggering international condemnation. The Royal Cambodian Armed Forces, in contrast, have leaned heavily on irregular units. Special Forces detachments from Brigade 919, supported by elements of the Prime Minister's bodyguard unit, have reinforced strategic checkpoints and forward bunkers near the Preah Vihear complex. But Cambodia lacks air parity, and its long-range artillery inventory remains limited. Most of its defensive firepower relies on Soviet-era D-30 howitzers and Chinese-supplied PCL-181 systems, both capable of harassment fire, but insufficient for strategic denial. To offset this imbalance, Cambodia has shifted to tactical unpredictability. Ambush raids, sabotage of Thai supply lines, and low-altitude drone incursions, designed more to provoke reaction than to achieve decisive effects. The battlefield has become a mosaic of asymmetry, not because of design, but because of necessity. Still, neither side has publicly declared war, and this ambiguity serves a purpose. By operating under the threshold of formal war, both governments preserve plausible deniability in the international arena. Thailand presents its operations as border protection. Cambodia frames its actions as self-defense. This legal gray zone is the new normal in regional conflicts, where hard power is deployed without rhetorical escalation. But the danger lies not in intentions. It lies in miscalculation. Military missteps in these conditions are not hypothetical. Already, there have been conflicting claims over airspace violations. Cambodian officials accused Thai drones of crossing 10 kilometers into national territory. Thailand responded by accusing Cambodian ground forces of firing upon a Thai observation post near Chong Sangam. Meanwhile, diplomatic backchannels remain murky. The Thai Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a guarded statement calling for neighborly restraint, even as troops continued their forward push toward the disputed triangle east of Ta Krabi. Cambodia's foreign minister appealed to the United Nations Security Council, but the move was symbolic. No resolution followed. No session was scheduled. The issue was buried beneath more pressing global headlines. In Gaza, in Ukraine, in the South China Sea. Here, then, lies the core of the geopolitical dilemma. The Thai-Cambodian War is not loud enough to provoke international intervention, and not quiet enough to resolve itself. It exists in a zone of suspended consequences, where each side calibrates its actions just below the global threshold for outrage, and where third-party actors, especially regional powers, calculate whether involvement would serve their interests or entangle them further. Vietnam, though silent, is watching closely. It has historical leverage in Cambodia and strategic suspicion toward Thailand. China, officially neutral, remains deeply invested in the Cambodian military's evolution. Its advisors are present unofficially. Its satellites observe continuously. And its next move will depend on whether this conflict remains contained. The United States, though distracted by domestic recalibrations and the renewed Gaza aid deployment, has quietly updated its strategic watch list. Thailand remains a treaty ally. Cambodia remains within China's orbit. Any further escalation risks drawing both Washington and Beijing into a proxy posturing contest they have thus far sought to avoid in mainland Southeast Asia. What is unfolding, then, is not just a clash over temples and ridgelines. It is a micro-theater of 21st-century power diffusion where old alliances are stressed and new alignments are tested. A regional war in the shadow of global geometry. As artillery exchanges intensify and the battlefront expands, the absence of diplomatic traction has begun to reshape regional psychology. Inside Phnom Penh, the Cambodian government has activated wartime emergency protocols for the first time since the 2011 clashes. But unlike the past, this is not a limited incursion. The scope of civilian displacement has surpassed internal thresholds. Over 16,000 Cambodians have now been registered in emergency camps set up by the Cambodian Red Cross, primarily in Preah Vihear, Odar Minchi, and Kampong Thom provinces. Water shortages are already reported, and logistical corridors are strained by fuel rationing and road damage caused by Thai shelling near the Chom-San axis. On the Thai side, evacuations have proceeded with greater speed, but with less visibility. The Ministry of Interior has relocated several thousand residents from border districts, but official figures remain vague. Unlike Cambodia, Thailand maintains stronger internal logistics, but also greater political vulnerability. The Shinawatra government, still consolidating its authority after a contested parliamentary cycle, now finds itself navigating a militarized nationalism it can no longer fully control. Hardline elements within the Thai Royal Army have gained operational autonomy, particularly in regions aligned with the First Army area. These commanders are not merely executing orders. They are shaping policy through action. This introduces a dangerous asymmetry of control. Cambodia's war effort is tightly centralized, with Hun Manet maintaining near-total command authority over military actions, information releases, and strategic signaling. Thailand, by contrast, is exhibiting a dual power structure, a civilian government trying to manage international optics, and a military establishment pushing kinetic decisions in real time. Such divergence is not unprecedented in Southeast Asia, but it is volatile. Because when field commanders begin to act ahead of policymakers, strategic ambiguity becomes weaponized not for deterrence, but for escalation. The international response remains muted. The United Nations has released a perfunctory statement calling for restraint and dialogue. No resolution has been tabled, no observers have been dispatched. The Security Council is preoccupied with overlapping crises in Eastern Europe, the Levant, and Sub-Saharan Africa. The United States has issued a statement from the Department of State, encouraging both sides to de-escalate and engage in dialogue. Yet behind the platitudes lies a growing awareness that the Thai-Cambodian conflict is not simply an unfortunate flare-up, but a geopolitical variable that could spiral into a regional test of strength. Washington's strategic assets in Southeast Asia are finite and pre-positioned primarily for maritime scenarios, not land conflicts along disputed borders. Should this confrontation escalate further, the question will not be how much power the United States is willing to project, but how much instability it is willing to tolerate. China's calculus is more nuanced. Publicly, Beijing has called for peaceful resolution and mutual respect for sovereignty. Privately, its defense attachés in Phnom Penh have briefed Cambodian command elements on conflict duration planning, humanitarian logistics, and escalation thresholds. This does not mean that China will intervene militarily. It means China is hedging, preparing for both outcomes: a swift resolution that preserves its investment portfolio, or a protracted engagement that draws in Vietnamese and American countermeasures, fragmenting ASEAN further and increasing Beijing's relative influence. Vietnam remains silent, but its silence is not passive. Military observers in Hanoi have increased reconnaissance flights along the Cambodian border. Intelligence sharing between Vietnam and the United States, long dormant on Thai-related matters, has quietly resumed. Analysts within the Vietnamese Ministry of National Defense have reportedly recommended full mobilization of border surveillance units in Tay Ninh and Long An, not in anticipation of direct engagement, but in preparation for collapse. Because if the Thai-Cambodian war expands, the refugee flow will not stop at provincial checkpoints. It will overflow toward Vietnam and beyond. The broader implications, then, are emerging not through battle reports, but through diplomatic paralysis. ASEAN, once envisioned as a geopolitical counterweight to both China and Western hegemony, has failed to mount even a symbolic intervention. The rotating chair, currently held by the Philippines, has not convened an emergency session. Bilateral calls have been made, but multilateral diplomacy has collapsed under the weight of neutrality. This reveals a regional truth that few wish to acknowledge: that ASEAN, for all its declarations of unity, is structurally incapable of addressing intra-bloc conflict when national interests diverge, and that weakness will be exploited by Thailand, by Cambodia, and by every major power with a stake in Southeast Asia's future fragmentation. As the conflict enters its second week without ceasefire, a deeper transformation is taking place. One that is not measured in square kilometers or casualty counts, but in the shifting architecture of power projection across mainland Southeast Asia. Thailand's strategic doctrine is no longer reactive. It is assertive by design. While official statements from Bangkok still emphasize protection of sovereignty and border integrity, the military's operational tempo indicates a broader intent to establish facts on the ground. Satellite imagery released through third-party intelligence channels confirms the construction of reinforced firebases along the Khao Phraya Vihear Ridge. These positions, equipped with radar-guided artillery and mobile anti-air units, serve a dual purpose: sustain the current campaign and lock in Thailand's tactical advantage even if a ceasefire is eventually imposed. This strategy mirrors Russia's entrenchment model in the Donbass after 2014 or China's artificial island consolidation in the South China Sea. In each case, the logic is identical: occupy, fortify, negotiate later from strength. Cambodia lacks the capacity to match this pattern. Its forces are holding ground, not taking it. Every kilometer gained by Thailand becomes a psychological blow to Hun Mane's legitimacy, both among his domestic elite and within the broader Cambodian officer corps, where memories of past Thai incursions run deep. This is not just a crisis of borders. It is a crisis of prestige. And prestige, once lost in the geopolitical arena, becomes difficult to restore without either escalation or external alignment. For Cambodia, the options are narrowing. Open alignment with China risks alienating Vietnamese support networks still embedded within Phnom Penh's military institutions. Appealing to ASEAN has yielded no operational outcome, and the West, consumed with Gaza, Ukraine, and an increasingly fractured global order, offers only rhetorical gestures. That leaves Cambodia with one remaining asset: unpredictability. Cambodian defense analysts, many trained in Vietnamese and Soviet-era doctrine, understand the strategic value of friction, of turning a conflict from linear engagement into dispersed resistance. Already, small units operating in civilian zones have begun conducting sabotage against Thai infrastructure, not for territorial gain, but to raise the cost of occupation. This is a shift from conventional deterrence to irregular attrition. Thailand, in turn, faces a different dilemma. Victory, if defined by battlefield metrics, is achievable, but political victory is not guaranteed. Every day that passes without resolution risks inflaming public fatigue, intensifying international scrutiny, and exposing internal rifts between Bangkok's civilian leadership and its military command. Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra, though publicly aligned with the army's objectives, remains under quiet pressure from business factions and regional allies who view prolonged war as economically corrosive and diplomatically hazardous. Thailand's trade flows, especially with Vietnam, Indonesia, and Malaysia, are beginning to encounter friction. Border crossings are closing. Insurance premiums on cross-border transport have surged. Tourism, a cornerstone of Thailand's post-pandemic recovery, is in freefall near conflict-adjacent provinces. The economic toll is not yet catastrophic, but it is growing. And economic pressure, historically, has been one of the few levers capable of tempering Thai military assertiveness. But the question is not simply when Thailand will choose to halt. The question is whether Cambodia can endure long enough to force that choice. Into this landscape steps another actor, not with tanks or treaties, but with data: China. Beijing has increased satellite coverage of the battlefield zone, not through public platforms, but via military commercial hybrids like the Gaofen satellite constellation. Chinese defense firms with joint ventures in Phnom Penh have provided Cambodia with signal intelligence on Thai troop movements, drone activity, and logistics flows. This support remains unofficial and plausibly deniable, but it confirms what analysts have suspected since the first exchange of fire: that China views this war not merely as a distraction, but as a proving ground. A proving ground for how far its influence can be exercised without direct deployment, and how deeply Thailand's military ambitions can be drawn into a conflict that stretches its resources thin. The Cold War logic of proxy containment is not obsolete. It has simply adapted. The Thai-Cambodian border is now a frontier not only of nations, but of systems. Systems of alliance, systems of command, systems of survival. And as the world looks elsewhere, the ground continues to shift. Beyond the visible artillery lines and televised evacuations, a more insidious dimension of the conflict has begun to emerge: information warfare. Both Thailand and Cambodia have launched synchronized campaigns to control the narrative not just within their borders, but across the regional and international media ecosystem. But the methods and their effectiveness reveal stark asymmetries in capability and intent. Thailand, with its more developed cyber infrastructure, has weaponized digital perception. Within days of the first artillery strike, the Royal Thai Army's Cyber Operations Division seeded pro-government narratives across social platforms, framing Cambodia's actions as illegal infiltration and emphasizing Thailand's right to self-defense under international law. Hashtag coordination campaigns surged in Thai language forums, while paid influence networks pushed English-language posts framing the conflict as a response to regional instability triggered by foreign actors. This last phrase deliberately ambiguous hints at a secondary objective: shaping foreign interpretation to cast Cambodia as the destabilizing party and to deter third-party pressure on Thailand's offensive posture. In Phnom Penh, the response has been more reactive. Cambodia's state media continues to emphasize civilian suffering, framing the conflict as a defensive struggle against occupation. But the messaging has struggled to gain traction internationally, in part because Cambodia's media channels lack the bandwidth and credibility that Thailand's more sophisticated outlets possess. In the digital arena, narratives matter as much as missiles. Perception shapes response, or the lack thereof. And in this case, the absence of a global outcry is not merely apathy. It is the product of successful narrative control, executed with strategic precision. But even the best propaganda cannot mask long-term structural erosion. Cambodia's logistical capacity is nearing its limits, with key supply lines under intermittent shelling and Thai aerial surveillance denying large-scale troop movement. The Cambodian military has resorted to nighttime resupply convoys and ad hoc distribution networks run by local militia affiliates. Medical capacity in frontline provinces has deteriorated. There are credible reports confirmed by third-party humanitarian observers of field hospitals treating civilians and soldiers with outdated equipment and dwindling supplies. Thailand faces no such logistical crisis. Its supply chain remains intact. Its forward bases are well provisioned, but its problem is duration. Every day the conflict drags on, the harder it becomes to justify domestically. Within Bangkok's political elite, there is no consensus on how far the military should go. While hardliners demand total control over disputed zones, moderates within the ruling party are quietly pushing for negotiation, if only to preserve Thailand's image as a stable economic hub. This schism is widening, and history suggests that internal division is often more dangerous than external confrontation. Meanwhile, Cambodia is attempting to internationalize the conflict. Its diplomats have reached out to the African Union, to Latin American non-aligned states, and to religious organizations in an effort to generate symbolic support. The goal is not immediate intervention. The goal is to raise reputational costs for Thailand and possibly delay further escalation. It is a long-shot strategy. But for Cambodia, long shots are all that remain. Vietnam's silence continues, but satellite tracking data confirms a sharp increase in Vietnamese military activity near its western border. Ground-based radar systems in Tay Ninh and Giang have been repositioned for sustained monitoring of Cambodian territory. This is not preparation for engagement. It is preparation for collapse management. If the Cambodian state begins to fracture even partially, Vietnam will not wait for permission to act. Not for conquest, but for containment. This possibility, however distant, is beginning to shape Thai decision-making. Because if Thailand pushes too far, it may not only trigger Cambodian collapse, it may invite Vietnamese entry, and that would shift the conflict from a border war to a regional crisis. In that moment, the calculus changes for everyone. China may be forced to respond. The United States would be compelled to reassess its posture. And ASEAN, fractured, reactive, and uncertain, would face its most severe existential challenge since its founding. That scenario has not yet arrived, but the scaffolding is already visible. Each shell fired across the jungle, each refugee displaced, each statement ignored, brings the region one step closer, not just to escalation, but to revelation of what Southeast Asia has become, and of what it is no longer able to prevent. As the third week of conflict approaches, there is no ceasefire, no summit, no breakthrough, only a silence that grows heavier with each passing day, punctuated by the steady rhythm of artillery and the soft collapse of abandoned villages. In the heart of this war, beneath the tactical maneuvers and geopolitical calculations, lies a simple but brutal truth. The regional order, once envisioned for Southeast Asia, has failed to mature into an institution capable of managing crisis. The frameworks are still in place: the ASEAN Charter, the Treaty of Amity, the promises of non-intervention, but the mechanisms have hollowed out. This conflict ties boots on contested hills, Cambodian civilians in flight, regional governments looking away, is not an anomaly. It is a mirror held up to a region in strategic limbo, caught between multipolar ambitions and the paralysis of neutrality. Thailand's military planners, despite public restraint, have achieved a critical objective: the creation of irreversible facts on the ground. New forward operating bases, new logistics roads, and new territorial lines of control have emerged. Even if a ceasefire is declared tomorrow, the map will not be the same as it was 3 weeks ago. Cambodia, meanwhile, has absorbed the cost of confrontation in territory, in lives, and in leverage. Hun Mane's leadership, once positioned as a generational shift from his father's autocracy to a newer hybrid model of controlled openness, now stands overshadowed by crisis. His government's dependence on external aid, primarily from China, has deepened. His military, though loyal, is stretched thin, and his diplomatic standing is defined more by pleas than by partnerships. Vietnam continues to wait. Its doctrine, shaped by centuries of asymmetric survival, favors patience over posture. But Vietnam's patience is never infinite. The longer the conflict drags on, the more it exposes Cambodia's vulnerabilities, and the more pressure it places on Hanoi to act, if only to prevent Chinese consolidation near its southern frontier. The United States remains distant, strategically distracted, tactically absent. The Biden administration, already weakened by political fragmentation and foreign policy overextension, has issued no binding commitments. No diplomatic envoy has been sent. Washington is watching, but not intervening. China watches as well, but its posture is different. For Beijing, the conflict offers 3 distinct outcomes, all advantageous. If Thailand consolidates its gains and Cambodia stabilizes under Chinese-supported governance, Beijing retains influence on both sides. If the war spreads and fractures ASEAN further, China's long-term vision of bilateral dominance over multilateral entanglements is reinforced. And if the United States is drawn back in, even partially, China gains another theater of competition that strains American bandwidth. This is not to say China engineered the conflict. It is to say that China is prepared for every outcome. And so, the war endures, not as a flashpoint, but as a fracture, a rupture in the regional architecture that was never as solid as its founders believed. The idea of Southeast Asian unity, of neutrality between superpowers, of peaceful coexistence despite historical scars, now faces its most formidable test. And thus far, it is failing. Because unity without enforcement is a gesture. Because neutrality without leverage is a void. And because peace in this century as in the last, is never the absence of war, but the consequence of strength, structure, and clarity. As the smoke rises above the Dangrek Mountains, as villagers walk with plastic sacks toward uncertain shelter, as generals brief maps that no longer match official claims, a new truth emerges: that the future of Southeast Asia will not be written in communiques or summits. It will be written in territory held, in alliances chosen, and in the willingness to act when silence no longer serves. This is the logic of conflict. And in this region, that logic is cold.